The massive command bridge of the Dominion flagship Void Reaper hummed with activity as holographic displays cast eerie blue light across Commander Velnox's scaled features. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 muscular arms and razor-sharp mandibles, she represented the pinnacle of Dominion military evolution. Her species had conquered 17 star systems through pure numerical superiority and tactical precision. "Commander, the intelligence briefing on the human colony is ready," announced Lieutenant Krikstar, his voice carrying the metallic undertone common to all Dominion warriors. Velnox's 6 eyes focused on the central display as data streams flowed across the hologram. The planet Kepler 442b appeared as a rotating sphere, its surface dotted with small human settlements. Population 3,000. Military installations 0. Orbital defenses none. "Pathetic," she muttered, her translator converting her clicking language into standard galactic speech. Krikstar activated the cultural analysis module. "The humans have an unusual fixation on individual warriors from their history. They tell stories of something called legends, single fighters who allegedly defeated entire armies." The display shifted to show ancient Earth battles. A small force of 300 Spartans holding a mountain pass against hundreds of thousands. One human pilot shooting down dozens of enemy aircraft. A single Marine holding a position against impossible odds. Velnox's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among her kind. Ridiculous propaganda. No individual warrior can change the mathematics of warfare. Victory belongs to superior numbers, advanced technology, and coordinated tactics. She gestured with one of her 4 arms toward the tactical display. "We command 50,000 elite Dominion warriors, each enhanced with cybernetic implants and wielding plasma weaponry. Our ships can glass an entire continent. What can 3,000 farmers and engineers possibly do against such power?" The communications array crackled to life. A human female appeared on the screen, Administrator Lee Hana, according to the data files. She looked young, perhaps in her 30s, with determined eyes that reminded Velnox of cornered prey trying to negotiate for its life. "Commander Velnox," Lee Hana's voice carried across the void of space. "I'm transmitting our colony's complete surrender terms. We request 72 hours to evacuate non-combatants to the outer settlements. We have children here, elderly citizens, scientists working on agricultural projects. They pose no threat to your forces." Velnox studied the human's face with cold calculation. In Dominion culture, showing weakness invited destruction. This administrator's willingness to negotiate proved human inferiority. "Denied," Velnox replied, curtly. "You have 1 hour to prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in complete extermination." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence except for the low hum of the ship's massive engines. Lieutenant Krikstar consulted his intelligence tablet, his expression troubled. "Commander, there's one additional detail worth noting. The colony employs a retired human military advisor named Park Dae-ho. Our databases show he served in something called the Terran Marine Corps for 37 years. Velnox barely glanced at the file. The image showed an aging human male with graying hair and weathered features. Scars marked his face and hands, suggesting combat experience, but he appeared to be in his 60s, ancient by warrior standards. "They're Marine Corps," she said dismissively. "I've read the files. Humans send small groups of lightly armed soldiers against superior forces and somehow convince themselves this represents tactical brilliance. It's a psychological crutch to mask their military inadequacy." Krikstar's secondary arms gestured nervously. "The records indicate unusual success rates for individual human Marines in combat situations. This Park Dae-ho specifically was present at something called the Battle of Proxima Station, where human propaganda claims one man held off an entire fleet," Velnox interrupted. "I've heard their fairy tales. Reality is simpler. Humans exaggerate their victories and minimize their defeats. One aging warrior cannot alter the fundamental laws of warfare." She moved to the observation deck, gazing out at the 200 Dominion warships arranged in perfect formation. Each vessel bristled with weapons capable of reducing mountains to dust. Elite shock troops filled the landing bays, their enhanced physiology and advanced armor making them living weapons. "Begin the assault," she commanded. "Deploy all ground forces simultaneously. I want this colony crushed within 6 hours. Make it decisive enough that other human settlements will surrender without resistance." The fleet's engines roared to life, propelling the massive armada toward Kepler 442b. Velnox watched the planet grow larger in the viewports, its blue-green surface deceptively peaceful. Soon, Dominion banners would fly over another conquered world. What she couldn't know was that Park Dae-ho was already moving through the colony's underground tunnels, transforming frightened civilians into something the galaxy had rarely seen, humans with nothing left to lose. The sky above New Sol Colony turned blood red as 200 Dominion warships blotted out the twin suns of Kepler 442b. Their massive hulls, each the size of a city block, cast ominous shadows across the peaceful farming settlement. The ships looked like metallic predators, with angular wings and weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. Administrator Lee Hana stood in the colony's communication center, her hands trembling as she activated the emergency broadcast system 1. Final time. Static filled the speakers before her voice rang clear across the settlement. "All civilians, this is Administrator Lee. Proceed immediately to designated emergency shelters. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Above, Them Commander Velnox's flagship opened its weapon bays. Dozens of plasma cannons emerged, like the fangs of some cosmic beast, their blue energy cores charging with a sound like rolling thunder. The other ships followed suit, creating a constellation of death aimed at the helpless colony below. Lee. Hana's final transmission to the Dominion fleet carried desperation that cut through the cold vacuum of space. "Commander Velnox, please. We have 800 children in this colony. Pregnant mothers, elderly citizens who can barely walk. Give us just 12 hours to evacuate the non-combatants to the outer settlements." The response came not in words, but in fire. Velnox's flagship discharged its main plasma battery, sending a column of superheated energy screaming toward the colony's administrative building. The structure vaporized instantly, leaving only a smoking crater where Lee Hana had been standing. Moments before, in the colony's underground command bunker, Park Dae-ho felt the ground shake as the bombardment began. Emergency lights flickered red as dust rained from the reinforced ceiling. The old Marine's weathered face remained calm despite the chaos erupting above them. His grey hair was cropped military short, and scars from a dozen campaigns marked his hands and forearms. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Kim Min-ho, the colony's chief engineer. The young man's face was pale with terror as explosions thundered overhead, but his voice remained steady. Dae-ho moved to the tactical display, his movements precise despite his age. "Min-ho, take every family with children under 12 to the mountain cave system. The tunnels there run deep enough to survive orbital bombardment. Take emergency supplies for 2 weeks." The engineer nodded and rushed toward the emergency exits. Outside, Dominion dropships were already descending like metallic locusts, their engines screaming as they deployed thousands of alien warriors onto the colony's outskirts. "Choi So-young," Dae-ho called to the colony's security chief, a former police officer from Earth. "I need everyone with military or law enforcement background. Teachers who served in planetary defense forces, miners who worked security details, anyone who knows which end of a rifle to point at the enemy." So-young's expression hardened with grim determination. "We've got maybe 40 people with combat experience, sir, against 50,000 Dominion troops. Then we make those 40 count for 1,000 each," Dae-ho replied, already moving toward the weapons locker. "This isn't about winning a conventional battle, it's about making them pay for every meter of ground." The first Dominion scouts landed near the colony's perimeter. These weren't the standard four-armed warriors, but specialized reconnaissance units, sleek, cybernetically enhanced creatures that moved like deadly spiders across the rocky terrain. Their enhanced vision could detect heat signatures from kilometers away, and their plasma rifles could punch through standard armor like paper. Dae-ho had been expecting them. Hidden in the dense forest that surrounded the colony, he and 12 volunteers lay perfectly still among the undergrowth. The old Marine had taught them an ancient human skill that no alien species seemed to understand: patience. The Dominion scouts moved in perfect formation, their enhanced hearing picking up every sound in the forest. What they couldn't detect was the network of buried sensors that Kim Minho had installed years earlier to monitor the local wildlife. Daeho watched their positions on a handheld device, timing their approach with mathematical precision. When the lead scout passed directly over the concealed explosive device, Daeho pressed the detonator. The blast sent 3 aliens flying into the air, their enhanced bodies no match for old-fashioned human engineering. Before their companions could react, muzzle flashes erupted from a dozen hidden positions. The surviving scouts returned fire, their plasma bolts turning trees into torches and boiling the moisture in the air. But when their targeting systems swept the forest, they found nothing. The humans had vanished like smoke, leaving only empty foxholes and the acrid smell of burned vegetation. This pattern repeated across the colony's perimeter. Dominion troops would advance, encounter fierce resistance, then find themselves fighting shadows when they tried to retaliate. Human defenders used every advantage their home terrain provided: hidden caves, narrow ravines, dense brush that confused alien sensors. By nightfall, Commander Velnox stared at casualty reports that made no sense. 200 of her elite warriors had fallen to what should have been a handful of farmers with hunting rifles. Her mandibles clicked with frustration as she studied the tactical displays. "They refuse to engage in honorable combat," she snarled to Lieutenant Crickstar. "These humans strike like cowards and flee before we can respond properly." What Velnox didn't understand was that Park Dae-ho wasn't trying to win a traditional battle. He was teaching the galaxy's most feared military force what human legends were really made of. Deep within the mountain caves of Kepler 442b, 800 colonists huddled in the darkness as Dominion plasma fire lit up the sky outside. The ancient lava tubes provided perfect shelter from orbital bombardment, but fear hung thick in the recycled air. Children cried softly while their parents whispered prayers in a dozen different languages. Park Dae-ho stood before the assembled crowd, his weathered face illuminated by emergency lighting strips that cast dancing shadows on the cave walls. For 3 days, he had led them in guerrilla warfare against impossible odds, but now doubt crept into even the strongest hearts. "Sir," whispered colony teacher Yoon Ji-woo, her voice barely audible above the distant explosions, "the children are asking if we're all going to die. What should I tell them?" Daeho looked around at the faces staring back at him, farmers who had never held weapons, engineers who built irrigation systems instead of bombs, teachers who instructed children about peace and cooperation. These weren't soldiers. They were ordinary people trapped in an extraordinary nightmare. The old Marine took a deep breath and stepped forward. "There's something you need to know about who I really am." The cave fell silent except for the drip of water from ancient stalactites. Even the crying children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. "My name is Park Dae-ho," he continued, his voice carrying clearly through the cavern, "but in the military records, they call me the Iron Tiger of Proxima Station." A collective gasp echoed through the cave. Every human in the galaxy knew that name, though few had ever seen the man behind the legend. Mechanic Han Seok-jin pushed forward through the crowd, his eyes wide with recognition. You're really him? The Marine who held Proxima Station? Alone?" Daeho nodded slowly. 6 years ago, pirates attacked the Proxima research facility. 10,000 civilians, scientists, families, children, were trapped on that station. The evacuation ships needed 6 days to reach them. I had 1 platoon of Marines and enough ammunition for maybe 2 hours of combat. The colonists leaned closer, hanging on every word. Outside, Dominion war machines continued their relentless advance, but inside the cave, something more powerful than weapons was taking shape. "For 6 days and nights I held that station," Daeho continued. "When my Marines fell, I fought alone. When my ammunition ran out, I used their weapons. When their weapons failed, I used improvised explosives. When everything else was gone, I used my bare hands." Young nurse Kwon Sora spoke up from the back of the crowd. The report said it was impossible. How did one person fight an entire fleet? Daeho's scarred hands gestured toward the cave entrance, where the sounds of war continued to rage. the same way we're fighting now. Not because I was stronger or faster or braver than anyone else, but because those people on Proxima Station were counting on me, just like you're all counting on each other now." Teacher Yoon Ji-woo stepped forward, her fear replaced by something harder. "What do you need us to do?" "I need teachers to become tacticians, mechanics to become demolition experts, farmers to become ghost warriors who can disappear into terrain the enemy doesn't understand." Daeho's voice grew stronger with each word. "I need you to become legends." The transformation began immediately. Han Seok-jin, who had spent his life fixing agricultural equipment, learned to wire explosive devices that could disable Dominion hover tanks. Teacher Yoon Ji-woo discovered she had a natural talent for marksmanship, her steady hands making every shot count. Even elderly shopkeeper Lim Dong-wook became an expert at creating camouflaged observation posts. Meanwhile, aboard the Dominion flagship, Commander Velnox stared at casualty reports that defied all military logic. Her intelligence officers had finally identified the human leader, and the files they uncovered made her blood run cold. "Commander," Lieutenant Krickstar's voice carried a tremor of fear. "The human military records, they're not exaggerations. This Park Dae-ho actually did hold Proxima Station alone. The tactical analysis confirms it." Velnox studied the holographic recreation of the battle. One human figure moved through the station's corridors like a force of nature, appearing and disappearing, striking with surgical precision. The computer simulation showed it should have been impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. "How many more of these legends do the humans possess?" she demanded. "That's just it, Commander," Krickstar replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. "According to their historical records, humans don't start as legends. They become legends when they have no other choice." The tactical display updated with new casualty figures. In just 3 days, Daeho's civilian army had eliminated over 800 Dominion troops, while losing only 12 of their own. They struck supply convoys with homemade explosives, sabotaged communication arrays with repurposed mining equipment, and vanished into terrain that seemed to swallow them whole. "These humans fight differently than any species we've encountered," observed the ship's tactical AI. "They adapt their strategies in real time, using unconventional weapons and seemingly suicidal tactics that somehow succeed." Velnox watched live footage from her ground forces as another supply convoy erupted in flames. The attack had lasted less than 30 seconds, executed by what appeared to be a farmer and 2 teenagers with modified industrial tools. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," Lieutenant Krickstar observed quietly. Velnox's 6 eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. These weren't professional soldiers following established doctrine. These were ordinary people protecting their homes, their families, their very existence. And in that desperation, they had found something that no military academy could teach: the willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than themselves. Because they don't, she realized with growing dread. They don't have anything left to lose. Commander Velnox stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the tactical hologram that showed her forces scattered across Kepler 442b like broken toys. After 5 days of guerrilla warfare, her mighty army of 50,000 had been reduced to 35,000 demoralized troops. The humans had turned her technological superiority into a liability, using the planet itself as their greatest weapon. "Enough games," she snarled, her forearms gesturing violently at the display. "Deploy every remaining soldier. I want overwhelming force concentrated on the colony's central valley. Crush them with sheer numbers." Lieutenant Krickstar hesitated. "Commander, our intelligence suggests the humans are baiting us into that valley. The geological surveys show unstable volcanic activity throughout that region." Velnox's mandibles clicked with rage. "I don't care if the ground is made of liquid fire. 35,000 Dominion warriors will not be defeated by a handful of farmers playing soldier." The massive deployment began at dawn. Dominion dropships descended like a metal storm, disgorging thousands of enhanced warriors onto the valley floor. Heavy assault mechs, 15-foot-tall robotic monsters armed with plasma cannons, stomped through the rocky terrain. Hover tanks glided between the formations, their energy shields shimmering in the alien sunlight. From his hidden position on the valley's rim, Park Dae-ho watched the enemy army gather through high-powered binoculars. The sight would have terrified any normal person. An unstoppable tide of alien death machines preparing to sweep away everything in their path. But Dae-ho wasn't normal. He was a human who had learned to turn impossible odds into victories. Han, Seok-jin, are the charges in position? He spoke into his communicator. The mechanic's voice crackled back through the static. All 50 explosive points are armed and ready, sir. But are you sure about this? Once we trigger the volcanic instability, there's no going back. Dae-ho smiled grimly. In war, there's never any going back, only forward. The old Marine had spent 3 days studying the planet's geological surveys with colony scientist Dr. Shin Hyun-woo. Kepler 442b sat on a network of dormant volcanic chambers, their pressure barely contained by centuries of accumulated rock and sediment. The right explosions in the right places could trigger a chain reaction that would reshape the entire valley. Below, Velnox's forces advanced in perfect formation. The Dominion military doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and coordinated movement. Every warrior knew their position. Every vehicle maintained precise spacing. It was a textbook example of superior military organization. It was also exactly what Dae-ho had been counting on. All units, this is Iron Tiger, he broadcast to his scattered fighters. Execute Thunder Mountain Protocol in 3, 2, 1, now. Across the valley rim, 50 explosive charges detonated simultaneously. But these weren't aimed at the enemy army. They targeted specific stress points in the ancient volcanic rock formations. The explosions themselves were relatively small, but their effects were catastrophic. The ground beneath the Dominion army began to shake. Cracks appeared in the valley floor, spreading like spiderwebs across the landscape. Steam hissed from newly opened fissures as underground pressure found release. Then the landslides began. Entire mountainsides collapsed in thunderous avalanches of rock and debris. The perfectly organized Dominion formation scattered as warriors fled from walls of stone crashing down around them. Heavy mechs, designed to withstand plasma fire, were crushed like insects under millions of tons of falling rock. But Dae-ho wasn't finished. As the alien army struggled to regroup in the chaos, his human fighters struck from hidden positions throughout the valley. Teacher Yoon Ji-woo's marksman team picked off officers with precision shots. Mechanic Han Seok-jin's demolition groups triggered improvised explosives that turned narrow escape routes into death traps. In the center of the destruction, Commander Velnox fought to maintain control of her disintegrating army. Her personal command mech, a towering war machine armed with enough firepower to level a city block, stomped through the debris field as she tried to coordinate a counterattack. That's when she saw him. Park Dae-ho emerged from the smoke and dust like a ghost, made flesh. The 60-year-old human moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his weathered face calm despite the chaos erupting around them. In his hands, he carried an ancient combat knife, not some high-tech energy weapon, but a simple steel blade that had seen decades of use. "Impossible," Velnox whispered as her mech's sensors locked onto the lone human figure. "You're just one old man." Dae-ho looked up at the towering alien war machine and smiled. "That's what they all say." The battle that followed defied every law of physics and military logic. Velnox's mech unleashed devastating plasma bursts that turned solid rock to vapor, but somehow the human was never where the weapons fired. He moved like liquid lightning, using the destroyed terrain to his advantage, turning every pile of rubble into cover and every crater into a firing position. When Dae-ho finally reached the mech's cockpit, Velnox ejected from her damaged machine to face him in personal combat. Even without her technological advantages, she stood 8 feet tall with 4 muscular arms and natural armor plating. Against an aging human with a simple knife, the outcome should have been predetermined. But legends aren't made by following predetermined outcomes. The fight lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Velnox's superior strength and reach meant nothing against Dae-ho's decades of combat experience. Every strike she attempted, he had already countered. Every opening she thought she saw, he had already exploited. When Dae-ho's blade finally found its mark, Sliding between the plates of her natural armor to pierce her primary heart, Velnox gasped in shock and grudging respect. "Your legends were true," she whispered, as purple blood flowed from her wound. Deho looked into her alien eyes and saw something unexpected, not hatred or rage, but understanding. Instead of delivering the killing blow, he stepped back and lowered his weapon. "A true warrior shows mercy to a defeated enemy," he said quietly. The gesture struck Velnox like a physical blow. In Dominion culture, victory meant total domination or death. The concept of sparing a defeated foe was not just foreign, it was incomprehensible. Yet here was this human legend, offering her something no Dominion warrior had ever experienced: mercy from an enemy. Around them, the remnants of her once mighty army surrendered to a force of farmers and teachers who had become something far more dangerous. Humans with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The remnants of the once mighty Dominion fleet struggled to escape Kepler 442b's gravity well, their damaged hulls trailing plasma fire and debris into the cold void of space. Of the 200 warships that had arrived with such confidence, only 63 remained operational. The others lay scattered across the planet's surface as twisted metal monuments to human determination. Commander Velnox stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the planet shrink in the viewports. Her left arm hung useless at her side, wrapped in medical bandages that couldn't hide the severity of her wounds. Around her, the bridge crew worked in stunned silence, their mandibles clicking nervously as they processed casualty reports that seemed impossible. "Final count, Commander," Lieutenant Crickstar announced, his voice hollow with disbelief. 8,000 survivors out of 50,000 deployed. The humans, they broke us. Velnox said nothing for a long moment, remembering the moment when Park Deho had spared her life. No Dominion warrior had ever shown such mercy to a defeated enemy. The gesture had shattered something fundamental in her understanding of warfare and honor. The journey back to the Dominion homeworld of Zephyria Prime took 3 weeks. During that time, Velnox studied every piece of data they had collected about human military history. What she discovered changed her perspective on everything she thought she knew about conquest and power. The massive council chamber on Zephyria Prime could hold 10,000 Dominion officials, but today it felt cramped and suffocating. The High Council of 7 Supreme Commanders sat on their elevated thrones, their multiple eyes focused on Velnox as she delivered her report. "Explain how 50,000 elite warriors were defeated by 3,000 farmers," demanded Supreme Commander Thekvor, his voice echoing through the chamber like rolling thunder. Velnox stood straighter, ignoring the pain from her injuries. "The humans don't fight for territory or resources, Supreme Commander. They fight for each other, for ideals that run deeper than blood, for the memory of those who came before them." "Impossible," scoffed Supreme Commander Zilnara. "No species can sustain such motivation without material gain." "I thought the same thing," Velnox replied, "until I faced their leader in combat. Park Deho, the human they call the Iron Tiger, could have killed me easily. Instead, he showed mercy, not because he was weak, but because his strength came from something we don't understand." She activated the holographic display, showing recorded footage of the battle. The council watched in stunned silence as human civilians transformed into deadly fighters, using improvised weapons and impossible tactics to defeat technologically superior forces. "Their legends aren't just stories," Velnox continued. "They're promises. Promises that ordinary people can become extraordinary when they have something worth fighting for. Promises that no force in the galaxy can break the human spirit when it's defending what it loves." The council chamber erupted in angry chittering and mandible clicking as the assembled officials struggled to process this information. For centuries, the Dominion had conquered through superior numbers and technology. The concept of an enemy that grew stronger through adversity was completely foreign to their understanding. Supreme Commander Vexthul raised his forearms for silence. "What do you recommend, Commander Velnox?" "Diplomacy," she said without hesitation. "The humans showed they can be reasonable when approached with respect, but they will never submit to conquest. Attempting to subjugate them will only create more legends." After hours of heated debate, the Council reached a decision that would reshape galactic politics. For the first time in Dominion history, they would pursue peace instead of conquest, with a species that had defeated them. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, the rebuilding had begun. The colonists worked together with the same determination they had, shown in battle, clearing debris and constructing new buildings from the wreckage of their old settlement. The community had been forever changed by their experience, no longer just farmers and engineers, but survivors who had stared death in the face and refused to blink. Administrator Lee Hanna, who had miraculously survived the initial bombardment, by being thrown clear of her building, stood in the center of what had once been the colony's main square. Around her, construction teams laid the foundation for a new administrative complex. "We should name this place after you," she said to Park Dae-ho, who stood nearby watching the work progress. "Dae-ho City has a nice ring to it." The old Marine shook his head, a gentle smile crossing his weathered features. "Call it New Hope," he said, pointing toward a group of children playing among the construction equipment. Young Kang Min-seo laughed as she chased her friends through the organized chaos of rebuilding, her joy infectious, despite everything they had endured. "That's what legends are really about," Dae-ho continued. "Not the fighting or the glory. It's about giving people hope when everything seems lost. It's about showing them that tomorrow can be better than today, no matter how dark things get." News of the colony's miraculous survival spread through human space faster than light-speed communications could carry it. On Earth, recruiters found themselves overwhelmed with volunteers wanting to join the colonial defense force. On Mars, engineering students designed new defensive systems inspired by the improvised weapons used on Kepler 442b. Throughout the outer colonies, ordinary citizens began training in guerrilla tactics, just in case they too might need to become legends. The story reached the farthest human settlements, carried by traders and travelers who embellished the details with each telling. A retired Marine and a handful of civilians had defeated an entire alien fleet. David had slain Goliath once again, proving that the human spirit remained unbroken even in the far reaches of space. In the rebuilt colony of New Hope, children like Kang Min-seo grew up hearing the story of how their neighbors had become heroes. They learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite that fear. They discovered that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they worked together for something greater than themselves. And sometimes, late at night when the twin moons cast silver light across the settlement, Park Dae-ho would sit on his porch and watch the stars. He knew that somewhere out there, other humans might face impossible odds. But he also knew they would face those challenges with the same spirit that had always defined humanity: the refusal to surrender, the determination to protect what they loved, and the unshakable belief that legends were just ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things. The galaxy had learned an important lesson on Kepler 442b. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or numbers, but the simple fact that humans would never stop fighting for each other. The end.